Something is deeply wrong inside the Indiana Fever organization, and a win is not going to hide it much longer. Indiana defeated the Phoenix Mercury, 86-77. 9 points. A comfortable margin on paper. But what actually happened inside that building over the course of 40 minutes tells a story that should terrify every single person in the Fever front office. Because this was not a victory built on system, strategy, or coaching brilliance. What you witnessed was one generational player quietly deciding she had seen enough and taking matters into her own hands. The question is no longer whether there is tension between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White's offensive philosophy. The question is how much longer the Fever can sustain a structure where their franchise player has to override the sideline just to keep the scoreboard moving. Let's start with the number that should have ended the conversation before it even started. 6. That is how many points the Indiana Fever scored in the first quarter of a professional basketball game against a Phoenix Mercury team sitting at 5 wins and 12 losses. 6 points. Through the first 9 minutes and 30 seconds of the game, Indiana had managed exactly 3 points. 3. Against a team that has spent most of this season near the bottom of the standings. And why did a roster featuring the most statistically dominant offensive player in the history of college basketball manage 6 points in a quarter? Because they were playing Stephanie White's way. The ball was moving laterally across the perimeter with zero intention of attacking the paint. Cutters were standing still. There was no pace, no pressure, no rhythm. Players were checking in, walking to their spots, and waiting for a play to develop that never arrived. When a professional offense scores 6 points in a full quarter, it is not a matter of bad shooting luck. It is a structural problem. It is a system that has no answer when the opposition simply refuses to panic. The Mercury did not even need to play particularly well to hold Indiana to 6 points. They just had to not give up layups, and Indiana's offense was not capable of creating any. That is not a talent issue. That is a scheme issue. And the talent on that floor for Indiana is elite. When elite talent produces 6 points in 10 minutes, the system deserves the blame. And then something shifted. You could almost feel it happening in real time if you were watching closely enough. Caitlin Clark looked at that scoreboard, processed what she was seeing, and made a decision. The playbook was not working. The scheme was suffocating the offense, and she was done waiting for it to fix itself. What followed in the second quarter was one of the more remarkable individual performances you will see in a regular season WNBA game. Clark stopped running the structured sets. She started pushing the pace before the defense could get organized. She pulled up from deep on her own read, not a designed action, not a called play, her own basketball instinct telling her that this was the shot and now was the moment. Pull up 3. Bang. Again. Bang. A turnaround mid-range over a closing defender. Bang. She was not consulting the sideline. She was playing basketball the way she knows how to play it, and suddenly the Indiana Fever offense looked like an entirely different machine. 35 points in the second quarter. The same team that mustered 6 in the first exploded for 35 in the second. The offensive system did not change. The personnel did not change. The only variable that shifted was Caitlin Clark's willingness to trust herself over the scheme. And the results speak with a volume that no press conference talking point can answer. When the system runs, you get 6. When Clark runs, you get 35. That is not a coincidence. That is a verdict. Now here is where the story gets genuinely fascinating, and if you have been following the internal politics of this franchise closely, you understand exactly why this detail matters so much. After the loss to Atlanta, Stephanie White stood at the podium and pointed to Caitlin Clark's turnovers as a primary reason for the collapse. She made it a public talking point. The message was unmistakable. Clark's decision-making was a problem. The turnovers were costing the team games. The implication, even if unstated, was that Clark needed to play within the system more tightly rather than freelancing. So against Phoenix, after openly defying that system and taking complete command of the offensive operation, how many times did Caitlin Clark turn the ball over? 3. 3 turnovers. While generating 24 points on 8 of 17 shooting with 3 made threes and 9 assists. She went rogue. She took over. She carried the offense. And she did it with ball security that would make the turnover critique vanish on contact. Think about what Clark communicated without saying a single word. She essentially ran the experiment in real time. Here is what the game looks like when I operate freely. Here are the results. Now tell me again that the turnovers are the problem. The +13 rating tells the rest of the story. When Caitlin Clark is on the floor playing her natural game, the Fever are dramatically better. The box score is not subtle about it. While Clark was making her statement on one end of the floor, another story was quietly unfolding in the frontcourt one that raises its own uncomfortable questions about the coaching staff's ability to evaluate their own roster. Monique Billings logged over 28 minutes against the Mercury. For weeks, reports and observations from fans had been pointing at her restricted role, questioning why a player the organization paid a premium to acquire was seeing around 12 minutes a night on a good evening. The argument that she was not ready, not the right fit, or not capable of handling more responsibility was a narrative that existed almost entirely in the coaching staff's rotation decisions. Against Phoenix, she played extended minutes and went 4 for 4 from the field. 14 points on a perfect shooting night, 10 rebounds, including 6 on the offensive glass, a team-high +15 rating. When a player produces those numbers, it does not look like a player who needed to be on the bench for the previous month of the season. It looks like a player who was being left on the bench for reasons that had nothing to do with performance. Whether that is stubbornness, routine, or some calculus around veteran hierarchy, the result is the same. The Fever were playing less effective basketball for weeks, while one of their most productive options sat and watched. And that falls on the coaching staff. Now let's look at the other side of the efficiency conversation, because the box score does not let this slide quietly. Kelsey Mitchell scored 22 points. If you are scanning results on your phone and you see 22 points, you think she had a solid game. But professional basketball is not scored on points alone, and any honest assessment of what she did on the floor against Phoenix has to account for volume. Mitchell took 20 shots to produce those 22 points. She shot 40% from the field and 30% from 3. By any reasonable efficiency standard, that is a difficult night. High shot volume with mediocre conversion rates in a game where your point guard is operating at nearly 50% from the floor and generating the offense at will. Here is the thing that creates the real tension. While Caitlin Clark was cooking, while the offense was humming and rhythm was finally established, Kelsey Mitchell was getting a significant share of the shot clock. Head down, isolation ball. No read and react, no off-ball movement, just creating for yourself and chucking at a suboptimal rate. You can make the argument that Mitchell is a veteran who needs her touches to stay engaged and effective. That is a legitimate locker room consideration. But it becomes a serious problem when those touches come at the direct expense of the player who is generating 35 second-quarter points and running the defense ragged. Someone has to decide what this team is actually prioritizing: inclusive shot distribution or dominant winning basketball. Right now, it appears to be trying to do both, and that tension is producing a wildly inconsistent offense. This is the section that will genuinely frustrate you if you watch the game closely. Going into the third quarter, Caitlin Clark was not just playing well. She was locked in. She had the Phoenix defense reacting to her, scrambling on every possession, unable to commit help without giving up a 3 or a driving lane. She was on pace for something close to a 30-point, 10-assist performance. By any logical measure of competitive basketball, you ride that wave as long as it is moving. And yet the third quarter brought Clark significant time on the bench. The offense stalled. The momentum that had been built over a dominant second quarter dissipated almost immediately. And the conspiracy-minded theory floating around the fan base is not entirely without logic. Did the coaching staff look at the box score, see that Kelsey Mitchell was not getting her share of the action, and cool off their hottest player in the name of keeping the locker room balanced? There is no version of sound basketball coaching where you pull a generational player off the floor when she is single-handedly dismantling a defense, unless something other than winning is the priority. You do not rest Michael Jordan in the middle of a takeover because another player needs more shots to feel involved. You play the player who is winning you the game. The third quarter stall was not a coincidence. It was the predictable consequence of prioritizing roster harmony over competitive dominance, and it nearly cost Indiana the lead they had fought so hard to build. The second half of this game stopped resembling basketball for extended stretches and started resembling something closer to a pressure cooker coming apart at the seams. The tension that had been building for weeks inside the Fever locker room, the frustration of a disjointed system, the inequality of the shot distribution, the simmering awareness that the coaching structure is not built around the team's best player, it all surfaced in the physical play of the second half. Sophie Cunningham was pointing her finger directly in Dana Bonner's face during one exchange. Masha Hines-Allen was ejected from the game. The Mercury were physical, the referees were inconsistent, and the game devolved into a parade of whistles, reviews, and flagrant foul discussions that killed whatever rhythm Indiana had managed to preserve. And then there was the Alyssa Thomas sequence. Clark and Thomas went for a loose ball. Thomas threw an elbow, you can see it clearly on the replay, a veteran move designed to create space with physicality. The foul was called on Caitlin Clark. When your rookie franchise player is on the receiving end of veteran physicality and the officials are penalizing her for it, the response from the sideline needs to be immediate and aggressive. You go to the scorer's table. You get yourself heard. You make it clear that your player is going to be protected. Cheryl Reeve does it. Sandy Brindello does it. Coaches who have built championship cultures do it because they understand that protecting your franchise player is not optional, it is foundational. Stephanie White remained passive. And that passivity is a message in itself. Indiana Fever 86, Phoenix Mercury 77. It goes in the win column, and on the surface it looks like progress. But if you watched this game honestly, you know what you saw. You saw a team that scored 6 points doing it the coach's way and 35 points the moment their best player decided she had seen enough. You saw a roster player buried for weeks finally get extended minutes and immediately post one of the most efficient games on the team. You saw a franchise player respond to public criticism about her turnovers by generating 9 assists and only 3 turnovers while playing her most aggressive game of the season. And you saw a third quarter where that same player was pulled off the floor at the peak of her performance while the offense went cold. The Fever won this game in spite of their structure, not because of it. And a 9-point win over a 5-win Mercury team is not the kind of result that should convince anyone in the front office that the current approach is working. The real test is not what happens when Caitlin Clark goes rogue and bails the team out. The real test is what happens when she can't when the game is tight, the defense adjusts, and Indiana needs the system to produce. Based on what we saw in the first quarter, we already have that answer. The question now is how long the front office is willing to wait before they acknowledge what the tape is telling them.